fatted frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes. Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and hopefully I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Ah, there she is. Okay, Rebecca Wood, hi. Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to be bringing you a wonderful hour of ecology and environment called For a Green Future. And we talk about ecology and environment in the way that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family. And we got a great show lined up for you today. First, Rebecca and I are just going to chat with you for a little while. And you can join in at any time at 877-909-1007. This is a call-in show, and we just love your calls. And if you're sitting at home looking at the snow and wondering what to do, pick up the phone. Give us a ring at 877-909-1007. Or you can send us a text at 419-973-5841. And we will drop everything and read your text on the air. And so after we have our little chat here till about quarter after, then I have an interview with a woman named Seanna, who is one of the protesters on the front line at Fairy Creek in British Columbia. This is a story we've been following for over a year, where the government of British Columbia is trying to cut down the last of the old-growth forest on Victoria Island. And there's people that are really taking care to try to block that. They're putting their lives on the line, themselves on the line. Over 1,000, over 1,100 have been arrested. And we're going to talk to Sean about that. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and sponsors, our wonderful, wonderful advertisers and sponsors. And then we've got some ecological. Oh, then we'll hear from Rebecca, who, Rebecca, what gem do you have for us this week?
I have the Alabama River.
That sounds promising. All right, so we'll hear about the Alabama River, and then we have some ecological news, and that's it. That's the wonderful hour of magical radio that is For a Green Future. And got to start this week with a couple apologies. One, got to apologize for last week's quality of broadcast, because we had a little technical difficulty there, and there was quite a bit of echoing. And so what I do is I take the show we're recording right now, and I turn that into a podcast and a YouTube video. So when I did my podcast and YouTube video, I edited it all, and I rejiggered everything and made it all listenable. So if you tuned out last week because of the sound quality, you can go pick us up on the podcast. And I just want to reiterate, the podcast is doing real well. We were number 74 out of thousands last week, and we're number 77 out of thousands this week. So thanks to all our podcast listeners. You're wonderful. Let's see. So this week, just a few things I wanted to chat about before we get to our interview. One is I have finally started watching the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. I talked about it when it came out last year, and it was described as potentially one of the best miniseries ever in history. And I didn't watch it then because I didn't have HBO. But my sons and I, over Christmas, we wanted to watch the new Matrix movie, but we didn't want to go to a theater packed with people. And so what we ended up doing was getting HBO and watching it on HBO. So now I have HBO, and I watched Chernobyl, and we did it looks like someone just tried to call in and try again. Oh, and if not, you can send us a text at 419-973-5841. So I'm watching Chernobyl, and everything everybody says about it is true. It's an amazing mini-series. The acting is incredible, and the getting all the technical details right for a meltdown of a graphite-cooled reactor is just incredibly impressive. And I learned things that I did not know about the Chernobyl disaster, and I thought I'd read up on it pretty thoroughly. But it turned out that there was a very real possibility of not just the fire and the initial explosion, but it looked like there was a very real possibility of a 30 megaton steam explosion that because the molten core was going to fall down into a bunch of tanks that were full of water, and that would have caused, just like the volcanic eruption that we just had down in the Pacific, that molten core hitting that water would have created a steam explosion that would have leveled everything for like 10 miles, flattened it. And the only reason that was avoided was because 3 technicians sacrificed themselves, killed themselves, going down into the radioactive basement and opening up sluice gates. And, so I'm learning that the Chernobyl disaster was even worse than I even knew, even though I thought I'd studied. We did get a call, and someone texted and said that they called but got no answer. And I just say, try to call again, because the phone did ring. We had a little, the little light went on. So we're going to just try to call again at 877-909-1007. Okay, so another little apology I have to make for this week's show is that I might be a little bit off today because I got my second COVID shot yesterday. I've been kind of putting off getting the booster, but I'm planning to do some traveling here, so I finally went and got my second one. I got J&J again, even though, that's not everybody's favorite flavor. Kind of like I don't like chocolate. I just didn't want to try the other vaccines. The J&J worked fine the first time, so I just got it again. But this brings up the whole conspiracy situation, of course, because so many people think that the whole vaccine situation is just a big conspiracy. And maybe this isn't the best day to tackle it when I'm not, how should I say, mentally at my peak. I've already, done a post on Facebook today that, a couple people have reamed me out for, so I'm, my judgment is off, but maybe that's why I'm doing this. So one thing I wanted to say about conspiracies, they do affect the environment. They do affect ecology, because a lot of conspiracies are conspiracies to destroy chunks of the environment for profit. And so what is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is basically just a small group of people meeting in secret to do things that benefit them. And there are conspiracies in human history. I mean, that's one thing we have to recognize, is that conspiring is an essential part of human of the human condition. Humans conspire all the time for their own benefit, and that's never going to go away. That's just one of the things in our toolboxes. There's been some massive examples of actual conspiracies that we now know about. One example most people don't remember is Bill Gates. Actually, back in the 80s, there were all kinds of operating systems for computers, and they were competing, and people would go and buy one or the other based on performance and things like that. But what Bill Gates did, meeting the definition of conspiracy, he went and had a meeting with the CEOs of the computer manufacturing and said, look, sell your computers with my operating system already installed. Because, way back then, computers didn't come with operating systems. You had to load the operating system. And that little conspiracy, that's what eliminated all the competition for operating systems, and what gave Bill Gates his billions. And, it was a conspiracy. Nobody knew this. He dropped this on the whole industry like a shock. And, of course, all the manufacturers later regretted that, because once he had control of the operating system market, then he started dictating to them how they were going to make their computers to match his software, which sucked and which still isn't that good. But, there's an example of a conspiracy. And, of course, another example of the conspiracy is House Bill 6, where we know, because we saw it with our own eyes, American Electric Power, when the hearings started for House Bill 6, got up there and said, we want something of this too. And what had started out to be an anti-global warming bill ended up being a support for coal plants, and that's all it is today. And so, that was a conspiracy. That was the AEP getting together with the Republican legislators who wrote House Bill 6, and they completely changed the character of the bill for the benefit of AEP, which is still getting hundreds of millions of dollars from our electric bills every month, because that part of House Bill 6 still stands. But we know this was a criminal conspiracy because people have confessed to it. There have been charges laid, and people have said, yes, I was guilty of conspiring. But one aspect of House Bill 6 that I want to mention is part of having a successful conspiracy is often creating the fake conspiracy to draw everybody's attention away. If you watched on Disney, if you watched that WandaVision, there's a scene in there where the Vision is practicing learning magic, and he says, flourish, because the good magician distracts the audience with the one hand, while the other hand is doing the trick. And what AEP did during their criminal conspiracy to block the recall petition drive, which I was a part of, they put forward in all their advertising a conspiracy theory that said the Chinese were trying to take over our grid. Now, there was absolutely no basis to this conspiracy theory. They never even offered any proof or anything like that. They just said it because they knew it would distract everybody from the real conspiracy that was actually going on, which was Republicans conspiring with First Energy and American Electric Power to put these charges on all our bills and charge us for exactly the sort of energy system that we don't want and don't need. And, the other big example we've got going today, and this is bringing it all the way back around to my inoculation there yesterday, is, of course, we know that Trump was conspiring to overthrow the election results because we have recordings of him telling election officials to overthrow the election results. He was in his small group of people trying to get benefit for himself. But, of course, what he did, because he knows how to be a conspirator, is before he even did his conspiracy, he put out the fake conspiracy that actually it was Biden that was stealing the election. So Trump was actually trying to steal the election, but he put out the fake conspiracy theory that Biden was the one stealing the election. And so it's an important aspect of having a successful conspiracy is creating the false conspiracy that you draw everybody's attention away with, and then you can do your own conspiracy. And but luckily Trump was pretty incompetent about it, but he knew the basic rules of conspiracy. So when you're evaluating conspiracy theory, look at what's actually happening. Open your eyes to what is actually going on, and then you'll be able to judge, is that the real conspiracy theory or is that fake? So for example, global warming, yes, it's cold right now and it was cold last week, but this is the end of January, and up until the middle of January we were having temperatures up in the 40s and 50s and sometimes even 60s. Global warming is happening. You can see it with your own eyes. So don't fall for the conspiracy theories that says global warming's not real, it's all a hoax, blah blah blah. Accept the evidence of your own eyes when you're judging these things. And so that was it. That was my COVID-inspired rant, because I am, I got the inoculation, so I'm actually kind of suffering from the effects of COVID a little bit here. Luckily, that's how vaccines work. Hopefully, I won't have a serious reaction. But now it's time to go on to our interview. And just to set this up, our interviewee is a woman who is spending the winter on the front lines in Fairy Creek in British Columbia. And there's people there trying to protect the last of the old growth. And so I was very happy that she actually had to drive down from the mountain to where she could get some cell reception in order for me to do this interview yesterday. So without further ado, let's hear from Seanna. Hi, welcome to For a Green Future. If you could just share with us your name and who you're with.
Hi, good morning. My name is Seanna, and I'm a land defender on planet Earth. I'm not with anyone specifically. grassroots group of collective folks who care about the rights of First Nations people and the environment.
Right. And you folks are out there defending Fairy Creek out there in British Columbia. Is that right?
Yeah, you bet. We're on Vancouver Island, off the coast of Vancouver there, in Canada, and TFL 46 is under siege, namely the Fairy Creek watershed. It's the headwaters of one of the last tributaries that's unlogged on southern Vancouver Island.
Right, and so what you're doing is protecting literally the last of the old-growth forests there on that island.
Yeah, that's right. We have a very robust logging industry here in BC. And some of the last remaining giants that we have left on the planet are here in a very rare, one-of-a-kind, ancient ecosystem. And there's about 97% of that logged out.
Right. So you folks have been holding the line for quite a while, and we've been reporting on it right along. But I wanted to check in on you because we're in the depths of winter, and I'm kind of wondering, what's it like for you guys there right now?
Yeah, the folks on the ground on the front lines at Fairy Creek right now are some of the hardiest people and the most committed, dedicated folks I've ever come to know. It's really cold. Sure, it's the West Coast, but it's still winter here, and we have snow. Also, the RCMP has pushed us down all the way off the logging roads right to the highway, so there's big snowbanks and there's traffic, and it's not exactly the safest space to be. So things are shifting a little bit on the ground right now. We're moving the front line. Also, there happens to be no logging happening there right now because the snow is completely blocking the road.
Oh, that's good. That was one of my questions. Is there logging happening now? I'm glad to hear there isn't.
Yeah, Mother Nature's helping us out a bit. We're getting a bit of a break to regroup and strategize and, come together in a less sort of code red emergency triage way at the front lines that we usually are pretty wrapped up in. So it's nice to be able to take a deep breath. Yeah,
that's good. So you mentioned the RCMP, and part of this story is that, of course, the RCMP made headlines around the world last year because of their brutal tactics they were using against you. Has the RCMP moderated at all?
I don't think the RCMP did anything except for change the optics of things for themselves. They know how to keep the media back. They set up these exclusion zones that you're not supposed to cross or you'll be arrested, and they keep media far enough away that you can't really get a good understanding of what's happening. They're strategic in their planning of when they know the most eyes will be on them. And they take people around corners and out of view to do the dirty work that they're sadistically seeming to really enjoy.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. So they're still up to their old tricks there.
Well, right at the moment, we're actually not blocking the road because the logging isn't happening and the snow is blocking the road. So there is no reason for them to be enforcing right now. They have nothing to, they have no business there, really. They occupy camps now just to sort of keep an eye on what's happening and just sort of observe. That's what they're doing right now. They're Canadians' taxpayers' dollars paying the RCMP to observe at this point. Did you hear the latest number with the Freedom of Information poll that just came out on the budget last year for them?
Yeah, but go ahead and tell us about it.
Well, we just found out that the RCMP spent $10 million enforcing at Fairy Creek in 4 or 5 months or so.
Wow. So $10 million doing something that most of the people in British Columbia don't want to happen. I mean, that's correct, right? Most of the people are behind you guys.
It seems like the majority of British Columbians care about old-growth forests. I can personally speak to a bit of a disconnect, I think, in people's minds and experiences in what an old-growth forest actually is, right? Many people haven't even ever seen these trees in real life or been on the ground, in this type of environment. They've only seen it maybe on TV of what it actually looks like. And yeah, the amount of money that the RCMP just spent enforcing a peaceful, nonviolent, civil protest, there was just really no need for that.
Yeah, and that protest, it wasn't just like young folks in college or something, was it? I mean, as I understand, over 1,100 people have been arrested so far, and they kind of a broad swath of the population, right?
Yes, that's right. There's been over 1,100 people arrested and thousands more that have come and gone, bringing supplies, helping with firewood and food, people volunteering their time in all kinds of different ways. Not everyone could be arrested, so there was lots of other things to do at camp to support those people that were putting their bodies on the line. And it was amazing how much attention this got and how much momentum was built. A lot of people got very excited and started learning about something that is very important and that we just didn't even see happening right under our own noses.
Yeah, it's inspirational. I mean, that's kind of why we're following it from across the continent, cheering you guys on there. I understand Extinction Rebellion has shown up and has sort of given you guys some moral support out there. Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. The good folks of Extinction Rebellion, for sure, have given lots of support. And it seems like there's all kinds of new groups popping up now in solidarity with other actions happening all over. It's pretty cool.
Now, it also looks like the loggers are trying to start sort of a PR campaign of their own there. Are you seeing any of that?
I tend not to get too much information on that. I haven't seen much about that. What are they up to?
Well, there's just, when I do my Google searches, I come across letters to the editor for bloggers and stories, and some stories talking about how they've got to protect the logger way of life. But you're not trying to eliminate logging, are you?
Oh, of course not. No, BC is famous for logging. It's a huge industry here. A lot of families that are, been in logging their whole life, their fathers, their grandfathers. It's the lumberjack legend, right? So it is valuable, and we're not after that. We just want to do things in a more sustainable way so there will be a future. I mean, a lot of these people that have logged out the old growth, they must be able to see the difference of when they were a kid and their dad was a logger, and now that they're a logger, and there just aren't those trees anymore. We know that. It's a fact. They're harder and harder to find. And what are we going to do when they're gone?
Right. Well, hopefully they won't be gone. But I think there is a lot of sympathy building for you folks all over Canada. There was a nice article in the Toronto Star this past week about it. And in that article, there was something I wanted to ask you about. It sounds like you guys living out there in the woods are sort of getting to know the critters get. The article in the Star talked about like a specific bear that everybody like has a name for. Are you kind of interacting with the natural world there in your camps?
Oh yeah, for sure. You're coming into someone else's territory when you go into the woods, right? So you'll see who was there before you and the ecosystems that are there and how they're functioning. And I spent over 80 nights in a giant hemlock up on the ridge at Fairy Creek, and I got quite intimate with a little hummingbird. They would come and visit me every single day, and we'd have a moment. And I'm sure there's lots of people at their camps with lots of experiences just like that.
Beautiful. So if someone were to come join you, I mean, what would they expect? Is there sort of a range of participation that you offer people?
Definitely there's a range of participation. In the heat of the summer when enforcement was in full effect and the injunction was on and RCMP were there every day, there was a lot to do. There was a lot of people. But now that things have shifted and things are quiet and there's no industry, there's not a lot going on right now. We're focusing on cleaning up the remnants of our camp, the garbage, trying to harvest some of the stuff that's there as salvageable resources to pass on to other groups or to save for when we kick off again in the spring. Yeah, there's not a ton to do right now except for cleanup and sort of recon. We're watching the roads, watching the snow levels, just sort of anticipating when road building might kick off again. So
if someone down here in Ohio wants to follow what you guys are doing and sort of keep track of the struggle, how would you suggest they do that?
Social media is a really good way to keep up with stuff. We've got laststandforforest.com as our website, and obviously the Fairy Creek Blockade on Facebook and Instagram. And then the Rainforest Flying Squad is another group that has a lot of information, facts, and photos and maps.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I guess I'll say that the Fairy Creek Blockade has definitely taught us a lot more than just how to save trees. It's an experience that most of us will never forget. We built a community out there, and a lot of the people we met became family to us, and we've built relationships that will be with us for the rest of our lives, you know, and a lot of the connections that are so deep that we've made, it's a greater understanding of how nature works. And when you get to know yourself and what you're capable of, you get more in touch with the people around you, and you build deep-rooted connections. And you can really make change when the intention is good and pure, and everyone's in it for the same heart-led, passionate reasons, you know? It's pretty miraculous what we accomplished, and I'm not saying it was perfect by any means. We had our stuff, you know, and thousands of people come together. But I think ultimately we learned something about ourselves that can change the world.
All right, amen. Well, thanks so much, and hang in there. And we're still thinking of you folks in the depths of winter there. All right, yes. And so that was our interview. What did you think about what Seanna and the other folks up there are doing? I just, again and again, I'm just amazed at how tough a lot of these protesters are. I mean, they are literally putting themselves on the line in some of the harshest conditions on the continent because of what they believe in, and you got to respect that. So, all right. And if you have any comments, phone lines are open again, 877-909-1007. Or texting 419-973-5841. And I got a text question that came in while we were playing our interview there. And the question is whether I have any specific national group, such as NRDC, that I support or that I think does good work. And I think the answer to that question would be look at who I have on my show. Because I tend to have on my show the organizations that I think are being the most effective and having the biggest impact. And I don't tend to interview the people from the organizations that have a huge fundraising arm, because sometimes I think those groups can kind of get more caught up in fundraising than actually pursuing their goals. And actually, they're more likely to, the bigger an organization is, it seems to be, the more likely they are to compromise. For example, should I even say this? No, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to try to exercise what little judgment I have, even though I'm a little bit febrile. But I'm going to say that, if you want to know what organizations I think are really good, go back and look at who I have on my show. So, Rebecca, first we got to have now I think somebody I think is really good are our advertisers and sponsors. I think they're terrific. 4 Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. And Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every single day of the year. And there's a couple different ways you can find out what's going on at the parks, and there's always something going on. They have a really impressive public event schedule. And so you can call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can go to their website, wcparks.org, and you can also download their nifty app from any app store. Just search for WC Parks. And of course, they're on all the social media, Instagram. I think they're on TikTok, all those things. Facebook, definitely. And just search for the Wood County Park District. 4 Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And patrons are wonderful people with amazing foresight who realize that if you want a green future, you have to invest something in the present in order to get a green future. And every month, a little bit comes out of their checking account because they went over to patreon.com. That's Patreon. And they signed up. And so a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us. And that's how we could afford to bring you this program and pay pay Rebecca's salary, for example. Couldn't afford to do that if I didn't have patrons. So really appreciate it. And so, all right, I think now we're ready to move on to Rebecca. How you doing, Rebecca?
Oh, not bad. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I suppose it's just as well you didn't actually ride into the station with me this morning. It was pretty nasty, I gotta say.
Yeah, it seems like you're having a challenging morning.
Yes, I am. How was my start of the show rant? Was it too ranty, or was it?
Well, it's pretty ranty, but informative.
Ranty, but informative. Okay, well, that's... Okay, I'll take that. All right. And speaking of informative, you have something to talk to us about this morning.
Right. Well, in honor of Martin Luther King Day, which I'm consistently running slightly behind on the holidays this month, but oh well. But
not too far.
So I was thinking about the march, in the famous march over in Selma over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And the result, the bloody Sunday after the incident where the cops beat people up as they were leaving Selma, I believe. And it occurred to me to wonder what exact river is being bridged there. And it turns out it is something called the Alabama River. The Alabama River is formed where the Tallapoosa and the Coosa rivers unite 6 minutes north of Montgomery near something called Wet'sumpka, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, and it empties out into the Mobile and Tensaw rivers, which then go to the Gulf of Mexico. But it's kind of odd the way it happens. They come together in a big X, essentially. Like there's the Tombigbee and the Alabama. That's what they are on the north, and then they cross, and on the south they become the Mobile and the Tensaw. So it's like the multiple weird X-shaped intersections that Monroe Street in Toledo forms with various streets, for example, is what it's like.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's 318 miles long total, and it goes through Montgomery, Mobile, and Selma, among other places. It crosses a lot of agricultural and timberlands also that are very rich. It's navigable, but it's mostly used for farm products, to take farm products out to the Gulf, basically. And the Alabama, the Coosa, and the Tallapoosa used to be sort of the center of the Creek homelands before 1830, when they were all removed, and only somebody called the Porch Reservation Band is still working, I guess.
The Cree, you say?
Creek.
Oh, Creek.
Is it pronounced Cree? Yeah.
Creek and the Creek Native Americans. Okay.
Yes, so it's pretty important fishing wise. Also, it's got some nice mussel beds, alligator gar, paddlefish, Alabama. What is this? Drater, some other fish. And then the Alabama sturgeon, which it turns out is one of the most endangered fish on the planet. It's got trouble because of overfishing, loss, and fragmentation of habitat. Which I think is not, it's not coincidental that the Alabama River is dammed 3 times has 3 locks between Montgomery and Mobile, I believe it is. So I think that environmental habitat fragmentation is basically a euphemism for locks. Because apparently, like the sturgeon used to be in all the area rivers, but now they're just in between 2 dams on the Alabama, which kind of says to me they can't go out and go anyplace else.
Right. Sturgeon are just amazing fish. I think we're going to have to do a show just on sturgeon. I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I was on Lake Michigan once, and my wife and I saw a 5-foot sturgeon like come in towards shore. We thought it was a log, but it was moving, and then we were like, that's a fish. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, there was a whole deal about apparently they used to be in the Maumee River. They're trying to bring them back in the Detroit River, I believe it is. So yeah, they're a thing in the Midwest also.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting river.
I thought it was a little bit.
Okay, all right, well, are we ready to go on to ecological news?
I think we are.
Okay, all right. So our first story is a story I picked today because I love it when a bunch of scientists say what I've believed for a long time. And there's a story in the website Futurism by a fellow named Tony Tran. It was published on the 18th of this month of January. And the title is, Scientists Say It Should Be Illegal to Fight Climate Change by Blocking Out the Sun. I mean, this is one of those things that seems so obvious that, blocking the sun is probably a bad idea. Probably these scientists felt that they shouldn't even have to say this. But, again, we have some of those billionaires who are conspiring, that is, lobbying very few people, very few powerful people behind closed doors. People like Bill Gates want to try geoengineering, which is essentially blocking out the sun. And what this group of scientists say, these 50 scientists, and the original article, it's an open letter that was published in something called Wires, which is the Wiley Interdisciplinary Review on the 17th. And essentially they're saying, if you really try to geoengineer, that is, change the situation for the whole planet, there's no way to understand the risks before you do it because it's never been done before.
Yeah.
And
that's going to be just a mighty rushing tsunami of unintended consequences right there.
Exactly. And the scientists are saying it could affect agriculture, it could affect food, the water, and one of the things that they're able to point to that say, this really suggests this is a really bad idea, is if you start artificially cooling the planet, what you're going to have are parts that are much cooler because you've cooled them with whatever evil technology you're applying. But then you're still going to have other parts that are much warmer. And that, when you create huge differences in temperature, that's what causes huge tornadoes and tremendous storms and hurricanes and wind. Yeah, wind. I mean, we saw what happened in Colorado with just wind. 105 mile an hour wind started these tremendous fires that burned down a town. And that's what happens when you create a patch of cold over here, but you've got lots of hot air over there. The Earth is always trying to balance itself out. That's why we have weather. So they're thinking that, this, basically they're just saying this is a bad idea. And it's 50 scientists who are experts in the fields of things like meteorology and physics and geophysics and let's hope people like Biden, the people that Bill Gates has Biden's ear, let's hope people like that might get some of this, that some of this information might trickle over to those people, because if you watch that movie Don't Look Up, that the situation we have now was a fictional movie, but they had a billionaire character in there who literally could just say, President, come over here, I have to talk to you, because they gave them millions and millions of dollars of campaign contributions. And that's ultimately what doomed the Earth, is this relationship between billionaires and policy. Billionaires should not be able to dictate any kind of ecological, environmental, or economic policies, because they basically they don't know what they're doing and they screw it all up. So that was my first story. Second story.
I think as a group, they have a lot of faith in themselves, which is what got them where they are, and yet they're prone to having a little too much faith in their own judgment about things.
Yeah, too much faith in yourself is literally a mental illness.
Narcissism or something? Yeah. I think it is.
If you think you can do anything because you're so smart, because you've got so much money, you've lost touch with reality, and time to get some therapy. And luckily they could afford really good therapy, but
right.
But also
the problem with narcissism is you don't know there's something wrong with you. You're resistant to learning that. So
yeah. So that's that story. But it's like I say again, I've known this is not the right way to go for decades. I've known all these geoengineering schemes are just insane. And one example of a geoengineering scheme is this idea of creating a ring around the Earth, like Saturn has, by blowing up satellites around the equator. And they say, the people who came up with this scheme say that'll reduce the amount of solar radiation by 15%. And of course, what that would actually do is it would destroy agriculture underneath those rings, because they would shade the Earth so much that plants.
Isn't the equator where a lot of important agricultural happens, which is very involved in creating food for people?
Yes. So you don't want to necessarily turn down the lights. No, you want to turn down the temperature, and that's a whole different thing. So, okay. On to our next story. This is from our good friends at phys.org. Kind of a complicated title. It was a study done by Cornell University. Bald eagle rebound stunted by poisoning from lead ammunition. And as we've reported, bald eagles are on the rebound, thankfully, all over the country. But this study by the Cornell scientists said that a lot of bald eagles are trying to eat carcasses of things like deer that have been killed with lead shot and ingesting the lead and dying. And in fact, they're saying about 5% of the eagle population gets, the rebound was slowed by at least 5% by all this lead poisoning. And, I'm not saying don't hunt. I mean, humans have hunted forever, but I am saying don't use lead ammunition. I mean, it doesn't just kill bald eagles. It kills wolves, it kills coyotes, it kills bears. Because what often happens is they field dress, which is, they shoot the deer and then take out all the innards and dump the innards wherever they are. And then the animals come along and scavenge those innards. And if they're full of lead shot, it kills them. So just some more information about that. And again, the solution is pretty simple. We should actually just ban lead ammunition. They have other sorts of ammunition that doesn't cause lead poisoning. It doesn't cause poisoning. And so we should just, nationwide, we need to ban lead ammunition. People have been saying it for decades, and it's true. Next story, follow up to our story from last week. The heat wave is continuing in the southern hemisphere. Now, it has broken in some places, and I can't find the same kind of headlines I was finding last week. We're talking about the record temperatures in the southern hemisphere. And in fact, both Australia and I believe Argentina tied for the highest temperature ever recorded in the southern hemisphere last week. So they both hit the record. But if you look at the map, the temperature map, this is what put me onto this story in the first place. All of the middle part of Africa and big chunks of Australia and the South America are still look just as a deep dark red as they did last week. So it's broken up some, but the heat wave is continuing. So once again, hearkening back to the beginning, if there's something you can see with your own eyes. You can go download that weather app and you can see what the temperature is with your own eyes and realize, yeah, this is real. Next story, and I have trouble re-finding this story, but it's from Dateline Fukushima, and this story I got it from the Asahi Shinbun, which is an Asian news outlet, kind of like AP. But what's happened is, as we know, there's Fukushima is covered with these tanks filled with water that's been filtered. That they have those tanks, though, are still radioactive because you can't filter out things like tritium. But what this article was about, what this latest crisis is when they filter the water out, what's left, what's in the filters. And it turns out that what's in the filters, and our Columbus listeners got a preview of this last week, what's in the filters is intensely radioactive. And in fact, some of it is actually core, molten, core that has been broken down by the flowing water, because water is flowing over it all the time. The remnants in these filters are incredibly radioactive. In fact, so radioactive that they are actually starting to destroy the containers that they're put in. And one thing people don't realize is that when you have a radioactive substance, an intensely radioactive substance, the radiation actually decomposes whatever you put it into, wood, metal, paper, because you get those subatomic particles shooting off at nearly the speed of light. They bust up all the chemical bonds in whatever material you've got. And there's a big scandal because TEPCO measured the radiation at the top of the container, but it turns out that the bottom of the container is like 1,000 times more radioactive than the top, because all the densest stuff, the plutonium and the uranium, goes down to the bottom and is the most. And so some of the containers are already at failure, and many more of them will become will be failing, reaching their failure point in the next few months and years. And so then the question is, what do you do with what you filtered out? And this is actually harking back. There was another filter crisis at TEPCO at Fukushima. They have air filters that are going constantly to try to filter out the particles that are flowing in the air. And there was a big scandal last year because it turns out that the radioactive particles being caught in those filters dissolved those filters. And so you had filters that were just gaping holes because the radiation was so intense, it just put big holes in them, and so their filters weren't actually doing anything. They were just circulating the radiation. So, this is one of those things if the pro-nuclear trolls have to come to grips with, and that is as long as you're making all this radioactive junk, you're going to have to deal with problems like this one. So that's the latest from Fukushima. Let's see. That's about all I had to talk about this week. How about you, Rebecca? Have you got anything that besides the Alabama River, that sort of struck your fancy this week?
Whenever we're talking about the climate, I always think about the fact that, because I'm a little bit odd and a mythology nerd, I always think about the fact that the Egyptians believed that there was a god of hot, dry air and a goddess of cold, moist air that sort of made most of the universe between them.
Interesting.
Which is sort of how things really work,
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, that's true.
Except for, Lord Shu and Lady Tefnut used to be doing a lovely sort of minuet, nice and slow and stately with the occasional gavotte breaking out, and now we've got them moshing. We got them all hyped up on amphetamines or something, and they're doing a two-person mosh somehow. And wow, yeah, it's saber dance, moshing with sabers, it would appear. We've got them very agitated.
Yeah, that's a good description. That's exactly what's happening. And again, open your eyes and look, and you'll see this is what's happening. Oh, I did want to remind people about how to drive in this weather, because when I drove in, 0 roads had been plowed the whole way. And I just want to remind people, go slow. When you're in this kind of weather, it's not a race. It's a question of survival. It's a question of finishing. Also, 2 hands on the wheel. Do not even think about looking at your cell phone in this kind of weather. And don't think you have to pass somebody. If you're behind somebody who's going a little bit slow, just go a little bit slow. Oh, and remember, sometimes people will not be able to stop at intersections. So, look very carefully before you enter one, because somebody could just come sliding right through because they weren't able to stop. And just once again want to sing the praises of my Wonder Van with the regenerative braking.
Woohoo!
I didn't do any slipping because I just would put it on low, and all the kinetic energy would go right back into the battery. It's kind of like, a magic car. I didn't have to put the brakes to slow down and stop. So, all right, all right, that's it for this week. And I made it through despite having being a little bit COVID-headed here. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want them nukes. Run